At his ex-girlfriend's wedding, whom he grew up with, my husband Thomas was getting married to a woman I had never seen before. When I confronted Thomas at the wedding venue, he said without a hint of remorse, "I've always dreamed of marrying Grace. So, please move out of the apartment within 2 weeks, with our daughter Madison." And you think I'd agree to that just like that? I'm tired of being your husband, Madison's dad. Despite what Mom wanted, it turned out to be a girl, right? I'm honestly disappointed. My mother-in-law Isabella laughed. Thomas, you loved Grace so much. She has a son, so she's proven. Finally, our family will have an heir. Sophia, you're not bad-looking and seem sturdy. I thought you could give birth to a boy. It was a disappointment. With arrogance, Thomas and Isabella went into the dressing room. Gradually regaining my composure, I was shaking with intense anger. So it's my fault for only being able to give birth to girls, huh? I too would rather not have a husband who doesn't care about Madison. Thinking this would just go away is a big mistake. I'm Sophia, a 36-year-old housewife who works full-time. Thomas and I met through work friends. I was concerned about Isabella glaring at me during our pre-marriage introduction, but we weren't going to live with her, and I thought it would be fine just seeing her occasionally. Little did I know, years later, I would regret marrying him. Mom, you wanted a boy. Why did it have to be a girl? I've lost count of how many times I've heard this since Madison was born. Though Thomas is the only son in a salaried worker's family, the issue of having an heir seemed irrelevant. I couldn't understand why Isabella or Thomas were so obsessed with it. When Madison cries, "Sophia, it seems like Madison's diaper is wet," Thomas calls out. When Madison seems sleepy during meals, "Why don't you put her to sleep?" he suggests. His stance on not interacting at all with Madison, not soothing her or changing her diapers, was refreshingly clear. Thomas, I want you to help with the household chores and childcare. Why? Isn't that a mother's job? Every time we have this kind of interactions, I suppress a sigh and take care of it myself. I hoped that starting work again would make him reluctantly help out. I returned to work a year later. From shopping to picking up Madison from the childcare center, when I get home, I feed Madison, bathe her, and put her to sleep. As Madison turned 1 and became even cuter, with her own little personality, there were many times I felt like raising my voice. So, I tried asking Thomas for help with simple things, but it was completely futile. Upon returning home, Thomas would relax on the sofa, playing mobile games, and demanded, "Is dinner ready yet?" Personally, I think even such a dad is necessary for a small child. Actually, my mom divorced when I was a child and I felt her struggle raising me firsthand. I also don't want to worry my mom too much. If she knew that Thomas disliked Madison just because she's a girl, she would be heartbroken. So, I didn't tell my mom about Thomas's behavior until one day a decisive event occurred. On a day I had booked a hair salon appointment, my mom, who was supposed to take care of Madison, fell ill and I was in a bind. That's when Thomas offered to watch her at home. "It'll be a piece of cake for about 3 hours," he said confidently, so I trusted him and left. Coming back to the apartment with my hair refreshed, I heard Madison's cries from beyond the entrance. Feeling a sense of foreboding, I entered the room and was speechless. Toys were scattered everywhere to the point where there was no place to step, and Madison was crying, her face red and contorted. While comforting Madison in my arms, her diaper came off and fell to the floor with a thud. "Did you never change it even once?" I forgot because I was busy." I wanted to snatch the cell phone from Thomas, who was laughing at a video, and throw it against the wall. "Your bottom must have been itchy, poor thing. Let's get you cleaned up." As I wiped Madison's bottom, Thomas made a displeased face. "I was watching her for you, and this is how you repay me? Fine, I won't do anything anymore." Since then, whether Madison fell and hit her head on the floor crying, Thomas completely ignored her. A while after Madison turned 3, Thomas suddenly said, "I have a reunion for my elementary school tomorrow evening. There's an after party, so I'll stay at a hotel and come back in the morning." As he said, Thomas returned the next morning in a surprisingly good mood. "Man, it was great seeing all those old friends. Everyone's married or has kids. When I said our kid is 2, they laughed, 'You, a dad?' Can you believe that? Rude, right? Typical friends. They know him well. I nodded deeply while making lunch. By the way, I have to work overtime every day starting tomorrow. And a business trip is scheduled for the weekend. What? I forgot to tell you. With that, Thomas went upstairs to change. Thomas's company is a small to medium-sized business, with a consistent level of busyness throughout the year. Instead of early mornings, overtime, or working on holidays outside the busy season, the salary was average. Thomas became busy as if he had switched jobs. Overtime, working on holidays, and business trips. Originally, he would leave for work while Madison was asleep, but now he returned so late that he wouldn't see Madison's face for days. But I thought it was okay. If he couldn't see her for a while, surely Thomas would miss Madison. But the reality was the opposite. Whenever I talked about Madison, he would cut me off. Dad. Even when Madison approached him, he coldly pushed her away. I'm tired from work. This doesn't give me any peace. Madison is happy when you are at home. Why don't you play with her, like coloring or blocks? Asking him that made his mood worse. Huh? How much more do you want me to work? Give me a break, he said irritably and locked himself in his study. What puzzled me the most was Thomas's paycheck. With all the overtime, holiday work, and business trips, his salary should have significantly increased, but it remained exactly the same. When I vented my frustration about Thomas to a friend at a cafe while leaving Madison at my parents' house for the weekend, my friend bluntly concluded, "He's definitely cheating." You think so too? But I can't find any evidence like long hair on the car seat or a hotel set as the destination in the GPS. He takes his phone everywhere, even to the bathroom and bed. Well, you'll find out eventually. A few days after that conversation, another sudden announcement came. I've been invited to a wedding tomorrow. It's being held at a nearby reception hall. You'd remember such an important thing sooner, right? I wanted to retort, but I restrained myself and casually asked, "Whose wedding? A cousin or a friend?" After pondering and twisting his head as if he just thought of it, he declared, "An ex-girlfriend from childhood." An ex-girlfriend? Isn't that a nuisance to the groom? It's fine because we're childhood friends. I'll be going on an overseas business trip right after, so I'll be back in a week. Does your company have an overseas branch? Yeah, in China. Oh, it's a business meeting. As Thomas checked his phone with a broad smile and headed to his study, I watched him go with suspicion. The next morning, Thomas left in casual clothes. Where's your suit? I asked, and he said it was a rental. After Thomas left, while I was vacuuming, I noticed Thomas's clutch bag on the sofa. Inside were his wallet, a handkerchief, and tissues. Feeling it was improper to show up in public with just his phone, I immediately called Thomas's cell. Hello? Thomas? You forgot your wallet. I'll bring it over. I truly do appreciate you for being so helpful. Please accept my apology, but I'm occupied at the moment. I blinked at Thomas as he started a strange conversation. Thomas, aren't you supposed to be changing? Who are you talking to? Just when I thought I heard a woman's voice on the phone, the call was abruptly ended. Something suspicious was going on, my intuition told me. The reception hall was a 30-minute drive away. I grabbed the wallet, put Madison in the car, and left the house. I dropped Madison off at my parents' house on the way and took a detour to the reception hall, arriving just in time for lunch. I wondered which floor it was on when I spotted a wedding plaque adorned with pure white flowers in a circle. I was shocked at the name I saw. The groom, Thomas, huh? I looked again, but there was no mistake, it was Thomas's name. My mind was flooded with question marks as I decided to peek into the room listed on the plaque. I cracked open the heavy door a bit and pressed my face against it. On the glamorous stage, the bride and groom were cutting the cake together, looking cozy. Seeing the groom, I was astonished. There was Thomas, snuggled up with a blissful-looking woman. Grace was Thomas's high school teacher. Thomas has made his 14-year-long love come to fruition. What a beautiful couple. The enthusiastic MC sparked cheers from a table that seemed to belong to Thomas's classmates. Congratulations, Grace. Good for you, Thomas. Faced with the exchanging shy smiles of Grace and Thomas, I was seized with the urge to ruin the ceremony then and there, but first decided to wait in the hallway for their outfit change to hear the story. After a while, the doors to the hall opened with a buzz, and Thomas appeared. He started to walk, led by the staff, but froze when he noticed me. "Sophia, when did you get back?" "Sorry, I'll be there in 5 minutes." After telling the puzzled staff, Thomas grabbed my wrist and pulled me down the hallway. Sweating profusely, he leaned in close. "Sophia, why are you here?" "I said I'd deliver the wallet." "What's this all about?" "This has been my dream for a long time, to marry Grace. So don't interfere." I sighed, pressing my forehead. What is he talking about? "So you want a divorce?" "But shouldn't the order be backwards?" "No, there's still time. We'll register the marriage when I get back from the trip." Then Thomas arrogantly said, "I'll give you a week to move out of the apartment with Madison." "Huh? And you think I'd just agree to that?" Thomas then raised his voice like a child. "I'm tired of being your husband, Madison's dad. Mom always wanted a boy, and I'm honestly disappointed it was a girl. Thomas, you need to change soon." Isabella, who came to call Thomas, showed surprise at seeing me but then smirked. "Thomas, you've always loved Grace. She has a son, so she's proven. Finally, our family will have a successor." I thought Sophia could bear a son since she looks sturdy. It was a disappointment. With that arrogance, Thomas and Isabella went into the dressing room. Left alone, I stood there dumbfounded. It's as if they're blaming me. Gradually regaining my composure in a corner of the hallway, I was shaking with intense anger. So it's my fault for only being able to give birth to a girl, huh? I, too, am fed up with a husband who doesn't care about Madison. Thinking this would just go away is a big mistake. After a while, Thomas returned from changing clothes, accompanied by Isabella and the staff. "She's just a persistent ex-girlfriend. Don't mind her." The staff glanced at me and led Thomas to the front door as if nothing happened. Isabella cast a pitying look at me before entering the hall through the back door. Then, Grace reappeared in a pink dress, and Thomas was smitten. "Pink looks good on you, Grace." "Thomas, you look great in a navy vest and tie, too." The two of them gazed at each other, oblivious to my feelings. To them, the presence of a wife and daughter lurking in the hallway didn't seem to matter at all. Who would think that Thomas, playing the groom so coolly, had a wife and daughter? Collaborating with Isabella, deceiving me. Thinking this made the seemingly naive Grace appear pitiable for her age. As the bride and groom returned to the hall, I could feel the liveliness of the reception through. The first to appear was my father-in-law, Mark. He was skeptical about the wedding plaque photo I had sent, but realized the situation once he saw it with his own eyes. As soon as he saw me, he apologized deeply. "Sophia, I'm sorry. What in the world are those two doing?" "It's okay, Mark. I'll make sure they apologize properly later." I confirmed with Mark, who looked genuinely sorry. "By the way, did you get everything ready for that matter?" "Yeah. We were having a party at home, so I brought everyone with me." As Mark gestured behind him, I turned and smiled. Typical Mark. "Excuse me, staff? I have a question." As Mark asked the staff for directions and headed towards the entrance, I slightly opened the heavy door. Perfect timing. I boldly swung both doors wide open and called out to the back. "Relatives of Thomas, it's your cue. Let's go." Having been drinking until just now, Thomas's relatives were red-faced and in high spirits. Why are Thomas and Isabella not joining the gathering? It feels like a wedding reception. Who's that beauty? Hey Thomas, planning to marry someone else while Sophia's still around? This is a bit troublesome. I approached the flustered MC. The introduction of the groom's family hasn't happened yet, right? It's already finished. Thomas grew up in a single-parent household and is estranged from his relatives. As you can see, the guests are only his high school friends. That's what they say, Mark. I turned back to Mark, who had just arrived. When did you divorce Isabella? We're still married. This incident has started to make me think about divorce, though. You! Isabella, pale-faced and watching the situation unfold, spoke in a barely audible voice. At that moment, Grace, who had been intruded upon in her wedding reception, gave me a questioning look. "You're Thomas's ex-girlfriend, right? Can you please not ruin the ceremony?" "No, I'm his wife." Grace was shocked. "Stop this harassment. Thomas, couldn't you have parted ways more smoothly?" "Mom, I'm sorry. Look, we can talk complaints later. It's the middle of the ceremony right now. Don't cause trouble for everyone here." Thomas, trying to shield Grace with his back, froze the next moment at an innocent voice. "Dad? Dad?" Grace's gaze shifted to the end of the aisle. Madison, carried into the hall by my mom, was set down on the floor and began walking towards Thomas. Until now, the situation seemed like an extension of a lover's quarrel, prompting smirks around the room. But with Madison's entrance, the guests suddenly became restless. Of course, they did. A child this small couldn't possibly lie. It was regrettable to involve Mom and Madison, but I couldn't stay silent about this matter. Needless to say, Mom was furious. Thomas, appearing to lack any love for Madison, couldn't bring himself to shoo her away in front of everyone. Awkwardly kneeling down to meet Madison's gaze, Thomas received an innocent question from her. "Dad, you look cool." "Thank you." "Mom, is Dad busy today too?" "It seems so. He's having a wedding ceremony with this lady." Madison widened her eyes in wonder, tilting her head. "Dad, you're married to Mom, right? But you're also marrying this lady?" Thomas awkwardly avoided Madison's gaze. "Ah." "Dad, you're popular. You always play games at home." Laughter leaked from somewhere. "They're going on a honeymoon tomorrow." "I want to go out with Dad too." "Then ask him." "I will." "Dad, take me with you." "You won't even take me to the park near our house." "Right, Mom?" "Come on, time to stop chatting." Thomas, looking uncomfortable, urged her to stop, but Grace confronted him with a stern expression. "Thomas, what's this? Whose child is she?" "Actually, I had her call me Dad because she's my ex-girlfriend's daughter. So she thinks I'm her dad." "Right." Exploding with anger at Thomas's desperate excuse, I decided not to hold back against Thomas and Isabella. Kneeling down in front of Madison, I smiled at her. I mentally challenged Thomas and Isabella, then knelt in front of Madison and smiled at her. "Hey Madison, would you be sad if you had to live apart from Dad?" To my straightforward question, Madison shook her head and said nonchalantly, "I just need you." "Really? That's good to hear. Dad doesn't play with me and always tells me to go away. I don't need a dad." Thomas must not have expected such a definitive answer, as he looked unable to hide his shock and grabbed Madison's small shoulder, showing his panic. "Madison, without Dad, you won't have a nice house or new dolls. Is that okay with you?" "What are you talking about? I earn more than you. And remember when you told me to move out of the apartment earlier? I'm the leaseholder, so you are the one who needs to leave within a week." Isabella, who had been silent, turned her attention to my words. "Thomas, you said you were supporting Sophia and Madison. That without you, they would be lost. Was that a lie?" "It turns out he was just showing off." "Isabella, I went back to full-time work immediately after giving birth because this man's salary is below average." Isabella glared at Thomas, who could only shrink back. As Mom picked up a sleepy Madison and left the hall, Thomas's relatives also headed out. Grace, arms crossed, confronted Thomas with a stern look. "So, who exactly is that girl? And who is this woman, an ex-girlfriend? Your wife? Make it clear." Grace's irritated voice silenced the previously buzzing hall. Then, the door opened, and two men in suits entered, holding up black notebooks high. They looked at Thomas and Isabella alternately and spoke in a firm tone. "Are you Thomas? No mistake?" "Yes. You're suspected of bigamy. Please come to the station with us." "What?" Thomas and Isabella showed their astonishment. Of course, I was the one who reported it. But I'm still fine." "Excuse me? I haven't registered the marriage with Grace yet. I'll make the wife sign the divorce papers later, so it's all good." The detective stared at Thomas in disbelief. Thomas smiled at Grace and ordered me. So, Grace, just wait a week for me. Hey Sophia, for Grace's sake, make sure you sign and submit the divorce papers, okay? Thomas brazenly declared, with Isabella chiming in. That's right, officer. We plan to divorce that incompetent wife today. So, take that child and leave the apartment today. But I told you, I'm the leaseholder. Are you stupid? Grace scoffed. She glared coldly at Thomas and Isabella, crossed her arms, and shouted insults at them. I refuse to marry a liar like you. Don't underestimate me just because I'm a single mother. Just so you know, I earn more than you. Mom, I'm scared of Grace. She used to let me cling to her, but she's changed. Isabella hugged and comforted a frightened Thomas. Thomas, you don't have to force yourself to marry. Let's live with me from now on. Sorry to interrupt, but we need to go now. One detective separated Isabella and Thomas. And you are Thomas's mother? You're also suspected of inciting bigamy, so please come with us. What? I have nothing to do with this. As Isabella shook off the detective's hand, Thomas showed a look of despair. That's not true, Mom. When I said I was meeting my teacher at the reunion, you encouraged me to cheat. I want a grandson, you said, pushing me. And now you're trying to escape alone? I never thought you'd actually go through with the wedding. My son doesn't understand jokes. Isabella justified herself with her chin up, while Thomas looked disillusioned. The beautiful mother-son love crumbled into nothing. All right, let's continue this at the station. Urged by the detectives, Thomas and Isabella left the venue with unsteady steps. Witnessing Grace's hate-filled gaze towards Thomas and Isabella, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. After the two left, Mark was the first to apologize to Grace. Then to Grace's guests and lastly to the MC. Grace, seemingly with nowhere to direct her anger, threw her bouquet to the floor and stomped on it before storming out of the venue. As a signal, the remaining guests also started to leave. The MC, looking over the empty hall, shrugged and sighed as if to say, well, that's that. I went to join Mom and Madison in the waiting room, treating them to lunch as an apology for today's events. Since it was Thomas's first offense and it was only attempted, he received a suspended sentence for the crime of bigamy. Thomas and Isabella were released 3 days later since neither I nor Grace wanted them to serve time. Greeted by hefty compensation demands and child support for Madison upon their release, Thomas lashed out. Mark, fed up with Isabella, informed her of their divorce and also found themselves responsible for paying damages to the wedding venue. Thomas and Isabella, reluctant to pay, made excuses to lower the amount, but when threatened with legal action, they finally agreed. When you threaten me with a lawsuit, I'll finally give in. He relented after I threatened him. Especially Mark, it seemed he had pent-up frustrations from over the years. Having been at the mercy of your whims all this time, I can't take it anymore this time. I'll let the compensation slide, just move out of the house. Really? I've been a housewife since we got married. How am I supposed to live now? Isabella pleaded with Mark, but he ended up giving her half of his retirement pay and the appraised value of the house they lived in together as part of the property division, and she had to move out. Moreover, Mark made it clear Thomas would no longer rely on him by making him sever their father-son ties with a written vow. Isabella ended up moving into a small, old apartment with Thomas, who had been kicked out of his room by me. However, their good relationship only lasted for a short while. Isabella, who had a habit of spending lavishly, quickly went through the assets given by Mark and constantly nagged Thomas for spending money, leading to days filled with arguments instead of their previous camaraderie. Thomas, who had borrowed money to pay us, Grace and me, for compensation, couldn't make ends meet on his full-time salary alone and had to work tirelessly, taking on part-time jobs over the weekends without a break. Having given up on Thomas, who was the worst as a husband and as a dad, I am enjoying my life with the adorable Madison. Someday, someone will shower Madison with love. When she starts walking, talking, and can have conversations. Every time I placed my vain hopes on Thomas and was betrayed, it seemed I unknowingly made Madison endure as well. Since splitting with Thomas, Madison has visibly brightened up, her chatter and smiles significantly increased. On my days off or when I have to work weekends or go on business trips, I moderately rely on going to my parents' house or having mom come over as usual. On days off from work, I take Madison to parks, zoos, and aquariums, making fun memories just the two of us. In the absence of a dad, I've decided to raise Madison.